Around midnight on Sunday, the 1st of November, a couple in their 60s and a 7-year-old child died in a house fire in Northampton. Someone squirted petrol into the front hall of their home. Now, there's no known motive, and it might well be that their deaths were unintentional. And if so, detectives hope that when the arsonist sees this disturbing reenactment of what resulted from their action, he, she, or they just might come forward voluntarily. Our reconstruction begins on the Thorpelands estate in Northampton just after 10:30 p.m.
Hey, you little minx, get in that bed. Ah, now, no more nonsense, or Cyril will be after you. Sarah. Hey, Cyril, do you want a cup of coffee, love?
Yes, please, love.
Stacey lived with her grandmother, Florence Pennell. Florence, known as Penny, was popular, lively and outspoken, a matriarchal figure with 7 grown-up children. 2 years ago, she'd become engaged to Cyril Fensham, a former plumber, and they seemed very happy. That Sunday, by midnight, their home was all in darkness, and all 3 were sound asleep. On the other side of Northampton, at Rubicon Casino, Penny's son Christopher, a regular there, was leaving after a successful night. He'd won over £400. He picked up a curry on his way home at Wellingborough Road.
Just don't tell me you're filling your face again.
I'll leave off, Iris. I haven't eaten all day. Mum's been babysitting.
How you doing? You still in the taxis?
Yeah, I'm going to get my own car and get it plated now, though.
Have you got the car?
Thank you very much, sir.
I'll see you later,
Thank you.
Iris.
Good night, sir. Thank you.
Chris lived with his mother, and having bought some coke and cigarettes, he headed home.
The Midnight News, this is Clive Bull.
It was after midnight when he pulled into Southolm Court. He sat in the car for a moment, listening to the local midnight news.
Murder. Independent Radio News. And the weather forecast, cloudy overnight.
Everything is here.
On the first floor, Christopher was watching BBC Two, a war film called Castle Keep. Upstairs, Cyril, Penny and Stacey were asleep. "50 yards away, this woman, a neighbour, had bumped her car and got out to check the damage. A man had come from the direction of Southolm Court. She remembers there were red slats on the back of his Renault Fuego. The car drove off towards Lumbertubs Way dual carriageway. Castle Keep ended at 12:30, and as it did so, Christopher smelt something like burning rubber. His first thought was to dial 999. But the phone wires were burnt through. The acrid smoke began to choke him as he tried to warn the family.
Help! For God's sake, help! Mum! Stacey! Cyril!
There's a fire in Southolm Court.
Mum! Stacey! Cyril! Someone started a fire! Mum! Go round the back! People in there! Whereabouts are they? On the top floor!
Penny had jumped from the second floor window.
Can you tell us what happened?
She just jumped.
Jumped from where?
Top.
Right at the top.
At first, firemen thought Stacey was asleep, but she'd inhaled fumes from burning furniture. Stacey died 4 days later. Penny died that evening of internal injuries. Cyril was dead by the time he arrived at hospital. Mr. Pritchett, what do you hope that showing that reconstruction will achieve?
You've shown some terrible scenes there. It may be that the person involved in this didn't intend these murders. However, the longer the matter goes undetected, the less likely it's going to be that such an explanation is likely to be believed. I'm hoping that whoever it is, once he's seen these things, will come forward and tell us, or anybody that knows of this person will ring us and let us know who that person may be.
The man who was seen by the witness leaving the scene, I gather you now know that he was unconnected with the fire, almost certainly. He was just a passerby.
That's right. Scientists have told us that he was at the scene sometime prior to the fire being started. However, he is the only man that we haven't yet been able to trace from those people that we know were about at the time.
Well, there he is, in a red-style jacket. He's 6 foot tall, in his early 30s. She was able to give you a fairly good description of him, I gather.
That's right, a very good description. This man may have been visiting someone in the area for quite a sensitive reason, perhaps seeing a lady friend. If that man, or the person he was seeing, recognises themselves, I urge them, please come forward and tell us, because we do need to sort this matter out and eliminate this man.
How much confidence will be respected if he was, as you put it, seeing a lady friend?
If that is the situation, I can assure that man total anonymity and total confidence.
I shall now embarrass him, if I may, because we've got to find him by revealing more about the car. The red Fuego, it actually had red slats on the back, I gather, that are quite unusual.
That's right. The manufacturers only make them in black plastic. So the painting on the slats would have been done either by the current or a previous owner. So
Right.
if anybody does know of a red Fuego with red coloured slats on the back, I need to find out who that person is.
Mr. Pritchett, it might seem superfluous under the circumstances, but someone's offered a reward, I gather.
That's right. A local Northamptonshire businessman has offered £5,000 reward for any information leading to the detection of this crime.
OK, well, please do call us if there's any way you think you can help. Remember, you can call us in confidence and you can speak to a BBC researcher if you prefer. The number is 01811 8055. There it is. Or you can call the Northampton Incident Room. That's 0604, the code, 703 572. 0604, the code for Northampton, 703 572.
Well, as we've said so often on this programme, it's a fact that the least likely people to become the victims of a crime are the elderly. Few criminals sink that low. And that's one of the reasons that when it does happen, it's a matter of particular urgency that someone who's attacked an old person is found. Our next case tonight is the murder of an 84-year-old lady in Devon, Miss Ivy Batten. Police don't yet know for sure, but the motive was probably robbery. Somebody hoped she had cash or something else worth stealing at home. Our reconstruction begins near Honiton in East Devon, where Ivy Batten had lived all her life. The hamlet of Chute Bottom lies right on the main Waterloo to Exeter railway line, deep in the Devon countryside. Ivy Batten moved here to this bungalow overlooking the railway line with her brother 22 years ago. When her brother died in 1979, she stayed on alone. Ivy had spent all her life in the area. She came from a large family and was very well known and much respected. She had numerous nephews and nieces.
Come on, Janet, you've been out there long enough. I've made the tea, so come and have a cup.
It hasn't taken as long as I thought, actually.
Her great-niece Janet was a regular visitor. On Wednesday, the 25th of November, Janet had stopped by to see Ivy, who'd been unwell with a chill.
Have you done any Christmas shopping yet?
No, I haven't even started, Auntie. I haven't even bought my Christmas cards yet.
Oh, I started to do my cards now.
Yeah, oh, that reminds me. I picked you up your stamps and a couple of chicken pieces.
Oh, thank you, dear. Oh, they look lovely. I should put one in the casserole and the other one can go in the freezer for now.
But that's why I got you 2 portions, because I thought that you would want to do that.
Well, thanks, dear, for what you've done today.
Oh, that's all right, Auntie. But listen, take care of that chill, OK? And I'll pop back and see you on Sunday.
All right, Ella.
Bye,
Thank
then.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Morning, postman. I was hoping I'd see you. Got 2 letters.
Right,
for
lovely.
You.
One for you.
Thank you very much.
Your paper's here a minute.
Thank you. Not a very nice day, is it?
No, it isn't. Bye now.
Bye.
Ivy spent most of Thursday working on her nativity basket. She'd made one every Christmas for years. She was known by many of the train drivers who regularly passed her home, and at 4:13 a driver remembers seeing her waving to him from her kitchen window. At 5:20, a neighbour passing the bungalow saw the place in darkness. But at 6:30, another train driver remembers the kitchen light was on, but there was no sign of Ivy. An hour later, at 7:30 p.m, her great-nephew, Frank, a farmer, drove by, having finished the evening milking. He noticed the front gate was ajar. At 9 o'clock next morning, Janet and her friend Ruth took her dog for his usual walk. Seeing the closed curtains, Janet assumed her aunt was having a lie-in because of her chill. Next morning, Saturday, all the deliveries arrived as usual. Then Janet and 2 friends saw the curtains still drawn and became really concerned. Janet found her aunt's body on the sitting room floor. She'd been beaten about the head and had died from her injuries sometime after the attack on the Thursday evening. When the police searched the bungalow for forensic evidence, they found that the electricity had been turned off at the mains. When the power was restored, 3 lights and the TV came on.
1 hour for lunch now. Go.
A week later, in a field 800 yards away, 2 farm workers found a pair of well-worn purple and gold gloves and a hammer. Forensic tests have confirmed that these were used by Ivy Batten's murderer. Well, in charge of the case is Detective Superintendent John Essery. We'll start with the gloves and the hammer which we've brought into the studio here. In fact, looking at them more closely, I would have said these gloves were not so much purple and gold as purple and brown or khaki or mustardy coloured.
Well, that's true, but they're very, very distinctive. They're predominantly purple, but they've got this gold band. And in fact, the band on the right hand is much larger than that on the left hand. They're also distinctive in that both thumbs are worn. And if you look closely, you can see that they've both been repaired. Both thumbs have been repaired, probably at independent times, because this one, the left, is with blue thread and the right with the dark thread.
So whoever used these gloves probably did some kind of manual work that made him wear at the thumbs.
That is a possibility, that it was wear. It's equally possible that they might have wanted freedom for the thumb in their trade or profession.
Now, these aren't bought in a shop. They've been knitted by somebody who might be watching now and might recognise them.
That's true. They're hand knitted. They've been hand repaired. The person that knitted them would recognise them. The person that repaired them would recognise them. And so too would somebody working or living alongside the offender.
Let's hope they would. Now, the hammer is also particularly distinctive. It's not an ordinary domestic household hammer, is it? It's an unusual one.
No, it's not. We all own hammers, and probably we can recognise our own hammers, but this one is very distinctive. It's what is called a blocking hammer or a planishing hammer. It's used in a variety of trades. It's used at technical schools. It's used in metalwork. It's used in precious metalwork. And it has been used, probably innocently, in its use in hitting a surface harder than its own, which isn't to be found in the household. And from our inquiries, we know that that hammer was made between April 74 and the 31st of December 76.
We can see it's split here, that makes it even more distinctive.
Yes, I think that the person that's used that hammer, the innocent person that's used that hammer, will recognise it. They'll recognise it by the crack on it. And I'm sure that if any viewer thinks that they've got a hammer like that, then I would ask them to go and have a look and see if they've still got it in their toolbox.
Right.
It may have been stolen from them.
Let's hope so. One particularly important clue also is that there was a car seen just a few yards from the bridge, very near Ivy's home. What about that?
Yes, that car is facing in the chute direction, just a few yards from Ivy. It's variously described. We think that it's possibly a white Viva with a black roof, but it could also possibly be a Cortina. It's been described by 3 witnesses, and that one was there in the evening between 18:30, that's 6:30, and 7:30 on Thursday the 26th.
Right, finally, this person may be us, and if so, do you think somebody might be sheltering them?
We've given the gloves and the hammer very wide coverage in the southwest. Nobody's come forward. It is possible that somebody's shielding them. To that person, I would say this. The person that committed this offence was probably a burglar. He may burgle again. And if he does, and if he's cornered, will he murder again? And if the answer to that is yes, then my message to the person that's shielding him is simply, could you live with your conscience?
Mr. Essery, thank you. And please help if you can, particularly if you know anything about those gloves or the hammer or the car. The number to ring here in the studio is 01811 8055, or you can dial Devon and Cornwall Incident Room direct. It's 0392 3991. That's 0392, the code for Exeter, 3991. Our first case tonight is the murder of Cathy Walsh. Cathy was 60 years old, a rather sad woman in some ways, and yet no one has yet provided any clue or reason as to why she should have been murdered. In 1986, she'd been thrilled to become a grandmother when her daughter, Pat, gave birth to little Amy. The child became Cathy's pride and joy, and there were few other joys in her life. She'd been quite ill in the past few months. She had severe arthritis, and only 3 weeks before she died, she'd been in hospital with a heart condition. Our reconstruction begins on the day before she died, October the 20th, in Tooting in South London. Cathy had lived in this street for over 30 years. Life wasn't easy for her. For 2 months, her gas supply had been cut off, and she was always short of money. She was well known in the area, as she had a habit of asking favours of some of the local shopkeepers and this garage a few yards away from her home.
Here she comes again, Vic. I bet she wants to use the phone.
Honey, all right to use the phone again?
Yes. Today, shares take another tumble all over the world. In the wake of last week's hurricane, the cowboys start moving.
Cathy's daughter, Pat, lived a few miles away in South Croydon.
Over who speaks what? Once again this morning, shares have nosedived on the London stock market. The 100-share index was down more than 300.
Hello? Hello, Pat, love?
Hello, Mum. Why haven't you phoned? Haven't you been well? She usually phoned her daughter every day. Look, why don't you come over tomorrow for a nice bath while your gas is off?
Well, I suppose it would do my back good.
Well, ring me before you come, and I'll make sure I don't go out.
All right, dear. See you in the morning.
Bye, then. Pat was very close to her mother, but there were still some things she didn't know about her. Opposite Tooting Station on Mitcham Road is the Railway Bell pub. Cathy used to come here regularly, usually on her own. But staff at the Railway Bell say she met a young man there several times until about 2 weeks before her death. And another woman who knew Cathy believes she may have seen them together one more time.
See you on Tuesday
Okay.
night. Bye.
Mrs. Robichaud overheard Cathy arranging to meet him the next day. No one knows who this young man is, and police are anxious to trace him. The next day, Cathy had been in a lot of pain and had spent much of Tuesday in bed.
I'm back.
She'd sent her lodger, Rudy, out for some shopping.
Here's your vodka and cigarettes. Don't forget to put the latch down tonight.
No, I won't.
Rudy works night shifts and was out all that night.
See you in the morning.
82, 82. 71, 71.
But despite her illness, she was seen later that evening at the Granada Bingo on Mitcham Road. She went several times a week and would usually sit by herself. Later, Cathy was seen sitting opposite a woman. Although they didn't appear to be together, police still need to trace her.
2 and 6, 26.
How are you tonight, Cathy?
Not too bad. See you later.
See you later.
A friend of Cathy's remembers she seemed unhappy that night. Later, she was seen in the foyer, and she seemed to be waiting. About 10 minutes later, 2 women saw someone who looked like Cathy boarding the number 44 bus.
Yeah. Haven't any money.
Cathy was in the habit of not paying her fare. She seemed flustered and upset. They remember her getting out her pension books.
Would you give this to the bus driver? It's my address. All right.
She got off the bus on the corner of Gorringe Park Avenue near her home. And that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Mrs. Johnson lives several doors away from Cathy's house. Much later that night, she'd been finding it difficult to sleep. The screams went on for several minutes. They seemed to come from the direction of Cathy's house. Just around the corner from Cathy's house, the milkman remembers seeing a brown Datsun parked across the pavement. There was someone in the passenger seat. At about the same time, a paperboy who passed Cathy's house remembers seeing the curtains open and her bedroom light on, but there was nobody in the room. Later that morning, when her body was found, the curtains were drawn and the light was off. Cathy had been strangled and left in her bed. Well, Mr. Gibb-Gray, do you think she knew whoever it was who killed her?
Yes, I think it's very likely that she did know who killed her. When we got to the house, there was no sign that anyone had entered forcibly. No windows had been broken, and the door, in fact, was intact.
And there seemed to be no motive at all.
It's a brutal and motiveless murder.
She didn't have any money, so...
She didn't have any money, no, that's right, and we can't think of any reason why anyone should want to kill her. She was a harmless old lady.
How certain are you that it was Cathy on the 44 bus that night?
Well, we have 2 people who say they saw her, and they're fairly certain that they saw her. What we'd like to do is hear from the bus driver who drove that number 42 on that particular evening. We'd also like to hear of anyone else who's on that bus who may well have seen Cathy. And the questions I would ask there is, was she alone? And when she got off the bus, did she turn left or right? Did she go home, or did she go back towards Tooting and maybe to a public house and meet somebody there?
Right. Just to assure the bus driver, who must have received that envelope, but that he'll come forward in confidence, won't
Yes, he may well have committed some minor disciplinary offence against the London Transport Board, but what we're investigating here is a very serious case of murder.
It's odd that Cathy didn't pay her fare, because in fact she had a bus pass anyway, didn't she?
That's strange, and we really can't account for that, and that may well account for her rather odd behaviour on the bus. Or, of course, she may well have been anticipating meeting someone later that evening and may have been slightly worried or concerned about it.
Now, the bus pass went missing. The other thing that went missing was one of her pension books. This, in fact, is not a pension book, it's a mobility allowance book. And this is a replica of what has gone missing. Do you think whoever killed her is the one who stole it?
It's possible. We don't know that it's been stolen. It hasn't been cashed since that time. It's worth about £88 a month. This one has a unique feature on it. It's Aken, A-K-E-N, corner, rather than Amen corner, that part of Tooting where Cathy would have cashed it.
So that makes it quite distinctive.
So we'd like to hear from anyone who's seen it since that time.
Right. Now, that young man, maybe she was going to meet him later that evening and maybe that's why she was flustered. You want him to come forward?
Yes, we'd like him to come forward. Again, he's got something important to tell us. He saw her on that Monday afternoon, and firm arrangements appear to have been made for him to meet her on the Tuesday. We'd like him to come forward so we can eliminate him from the investigation.
And perhaps anybody who's been drinking at the Railway Bell in the past might recognise him too.
That's right.
The other important thing is the photograph. The one thing you couldn't trace or identify in her flat was who the person is in this particular photograph.
Yes, that's very interesting because all her friends and indeed her family have looked at that photograph and they don't know the person. We would like the person whose photograph that is to come forward. It's probable that the photograph was taken in a public house or maybe a hotel in the London area or the south of England. We'd like to eliminate that person from this investigation.
Right. And finally, at 7 o'clock on the morning of her death, the paper boy saw the light on and then later the light was off again, and we saw a brown Datsun waiting on the corner of Bruce Road, perhaps waiting for somebody to come out of the house. Do you think there's a link there? Well,
that's very significant because the owner of that car clearly has something important to say, because if the paper boy is right, it means that at that particular time there was somebody still in the house, and he may well have left at the same time as the person who owned that car, or indeed, of course, drove that car, was there. So we would, of course, like to hear from him.
Right, Mr. Gibgray, thank you very much. There are a lot of points there. As always, the number to the studio here is 018118055 if you can help, or you can call the incident room at Mitcham direct, and that is 01541 2552. That's 01541 2552.
Our final film tonight retraces the last 5 days of a young Cardiff woman, Lynette White. Lynette was 20. She lived with and helped to support a boyfriend and was hoping to settle down with him and have children. Instead, on Valentine's Day, Lynette was murdered. This is Cardiff's Docklands, Tiger Bay.
Good morning all and welcome to Wednesday Street Life. Bore a day Chigid, Frank Hennessy Summer. I'm with you until 12:30. And we're on a bit of a crusade today.
Welcome back to Meet for Lunch and to our phone-in on Women at Work and the extent of
Red Dragon News. This is Martin Shankelman.
Lynette was a practical girl striving to make a living for herself after a troubled childhood. At the age of 18, she turned to prostitution. Every night, 7 nights a week, she'd work here from 6 p.m. till 1 a.m., often taking clients to a flat in James Street. When she stopped work early in the morning, she went regularly to meet friends at a nearby club.
You always steal my cigarettes.
Oh, come on,
no,
there's plenty.
I've only got
Come on, there's
7
plenty behind the bar. No,
This is the last one.
Well, I only knew Lynette from the club, but more of a friend than a taxi driver, you know, as the time went on, like. She used to talk a lot and dream a lot and, you know, like any other young girl, like, you know. But herself, she was a cracking girl, and I used to think a lot of her, like, you know.
Hey, Jack, how's your back?
Hey, Jack.
Look at the state of you.
Head on you.
On Tuesday afternoon, Lynette left her flat in Grangetown, and for 5 days, she disappeared. She was seen around the city, but she avoided her closest friends. This chemist shop is just around the corner from Lynette's flat, and she came here every Saturday to buy supplies of condoms. Lynette walked in as usual on Saturday the 13th, her 5th day away from home. Later on that evening, an old school friend saw Lynette standing outside a disco known as Monty's.
Really? So yeah. I'm looking for my father. Have you seen him? No. You come in. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Lynette almost certainly was not waiting for her father. She hadn't seen him in a year. It's not known if she did meet someone here or left alone, but she stayed here till sometime after 1 a.m. By now, it's Sunday. It's February the 14th, Valentine's Day. That afternoon, a woman walking down James Street noticed a man who was standing in a doorway. He appeared to have blood on his hands. This is next door to where Lynette took clients. The witness walked past the Maritime Museum and stood looking out to sea when she felt someone sit down beside her. It was the man from James Street. At 8:45 that Sunday evening, Lynette's best friend went round to check the James Street flat. She was worried by Lynette's disappearance. When she saw a door locked shut that was normally open, she called the police.
Charlie Quebec 07, I need a console very urgently, over. Yes, from Charlie Quebec 07, I'm at number 7 James Street. I've just broken in and found the dead body of a woman inside, and it appears to be a suspicious death.
Charlie Quebec 07, Roger, that's Northampton Wilco 07, console 1 out.
Could you inform the inspector and the CID to attend, and also get the police surgeon out, over?
John Williams calling it a suspicious death turned out to be the understatement of the year. It was the most appalling attack on her. She had been stabbed, I think, was it over 50 times and had her throat cut. Terrible
Indeed,
attack.
that is so. It was a very cruel, vicious and violent murder after what is a young girl.
Now, the man seen virtually outside the flat that she used to take clients to must be the prime suspect. A man who was mumbling, incoherent. I gather he was crying at times too, blood on his hands.
That is right. He certainly is a person who we must speak to at this time.
Would other people have seen him, and if so, how would they have noticed him? We've compiled a Crimewatch video feed. What are the distinctive features?
He is very distinctive. He's got dark brown, greasy hair with lightning towards the front of it. He's about 35 to 40 years of age and between 5'8" and 6 foot tall. And we must remember that this man was bleeding himself. He's cut himself. He's also got blood on him from the deceased. He's upset. He's crying, and he's in a bit of a state.
And presumably might have sought medical attention himself.
Well,
if he'd cut
indeed,
himself.
that is so.
Why had she left her flat for 5 days, do you know?
Well,
Where was she?
she's had a bit of a tiff with her boyfriend, and I think she's had problems with going to court to give evidence. She is a local girl. She would have stayed somewhere in the area. There is no doubt that someone out there knows where she stayed, and we would like those persons to come forward and speak to us.
To eliminate them, obviously.
That is so, yes.
Everybody seems to speak terribly highly of this girl. She was tremendously liked and admired, and I gather even a large number of her clients have come forward who went to her as she was a prostitute.
Yes, of course she was, but she was a popular girl, she was a quiet girl, she was well liked. But there are other clients in the city and outside the city who ought to come forward and tell us when they've been with her so that we can eliminate them from the inquiry.
Well, Lynette's family and close friends have put up a reward of £1,000. Here's the number, 018118055. That's 01811 8055. Or you can call the incident room in Cardiff. That's on 0222 398 381. 0222, the code for Cardiff, 398 381.
Well, now the first of those reconstructions. 3 weeks ago, Debbie Linsley was murdered in broad daylight on a suburban train journey to Victoria that took only 31 minutes. It was a case that made national headlines. Debbie was 26 years old and worked as a hotel receptionist in Edinburgh. She'd been visiting her parents to prepare for the wedding of her brother, Gordon. Both he and her mother helped us by taking part in this reconstruction of the events on the day of the murder.
Debbie was looking very, very much forward to her brother's wedding. She was very excited about it. She was looking forward to being a bridesmaid. When she went for a fitting at the beginning of March with the other two bridesmaids, she looked lovely in it.
Debbie was staying with her family for 3 days after a hotel management course in London. It was a happy time for her. There was the wedding to look forward to, and the day she was leaving home, she had a rather special date in London, en route back to her job in Edinburgh.
She'd been on this course from her hotel. Somebody there, you know, offered her a job, so she thought she would go and have a look around the hotel just to see what it was like. So on that morning, she'd got herself dressed up nicely, and she was going to have a look around. She had a few hours to spare.
At lunchtime on the 23rd of March, she watched Neighbours.
Look, do we have to watch this rubbish?
Oh, shut up, scumbag. It's nearly over.
Me?
Look, if you want to lift to the station, we'll have to make a move soon.
Oh, all right then.
Debbie was security conscious. She carried a rape whistle on her keyring. At about 2 o'clock, Gordon dropped her off at Pettswood railway station. It's on the Orpington to Victoria line. There are no more sightings of her after this. Police know she bought a ticket at 2:04. Her train arrived at 2:18.
She would always be aware of the dangers when she was travelling. Even with me, you know, we would always go into an open carriage rather than a closed one. She knew the dangers of that.
But Debbie was a smoker, and on this train, one of the few smoking areas was a single compartment, so she got in. It was at the front of the second carriage. She may have seen other female passengers in it, which made her feel safe, but at some point they may have got out. Police believe she smoked at least one cigarette, and almost certainly she started eating one of her sandwiches. At any rate, there's nothing to suggest that she was disturbed for the first part of her journey. Penge East is 5 stops from Victoria. The train arrived on time at 2:34. A witness remembers seeing a man hurriedly changing carriages.
Penge East. This is Penge East.
Another incident occurred after the train left Brixton. A French girl in the compartment next to Debbie's heard screams that lasted for about 2 minutes. She told the police she'd wanted to pull the communication cord, but was too shocked to move. When the train arrived at Victoria, the girls spotted a man with red hair walking away from near Debbie's compartment. She followed him. Eventually, she lost sight of him on the concourse. Meanwhile, the train was being checked for left luggage. Debbie had been savagely stabbed to death. There was no apparent motive for the attack. The ticket collectors at Victoria say 30 to 40 people got off that train, but so far only 26 have been accounted for. Police have now established that Debbie's attacker was injured in the struggle. A man with a cut face was seen walking away from platform 2 about 10 minutes after the train had pulled in. A little later that afternoon, in the gents' toilets at Victoria, another witness spotted a man cleaning a cut on his head. Thousands of people passed through Victoria Station that Wednesday afternoon. They could have been travelling to anywhere in the country or even abroad. Any one of them might help identify Debbie's murderer. Well, the officer in charge of the case is Detective Superintendent Alec Edwards. Now, can you just point out, we've got a model here of the train, where exactly did Debbie get on?
Yes, this is the front of the train, this is the second compartment, and this is the compartment that Debbie actually got into. Surprisingly, we haven't any witness who saw Debbie alive from the time she was dropped off by her brother until she was found dead some 30 minutes later.
And yet she was wearing very striking clothes, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. She's a good-looking girl. She was dressed in a blue jumper, blue skirt, very much like the colour you have on today, right, and with a black leather jacket over the top.
So you want anybody who saw her from that point?
Very much so.
Right. Well, let's move on to the man at Penge Station, seen changing carriages. What about him? You have a description of him, don't you?
Yes, I have. He's aged 30 years, stocky build, dirty blonde hair, scruffy, pale brown jacket. We urgently need to trace that person to eliminate him from the inquiry.
So he may not necessarily be the person you're looking for.
No, not at all. No,
right.
He may have other information for us.
Now, then we go on to Victoria Station, where there are 3 different sightings. The first one by the French girl who heard the awful screams. And do you have a description of the man she followed?
Yes. He's aged about 40, well-built, muscular rather than fat, reddish-brown hair, moustache, which followed the contour of his lips, light windcheater and grey trousers.
And what about the second sighting? Now, that's not the same description, the man with the scratch.
No, it's not the same sighting, and we do not think they are connected. But we would urgently wish to eliminate both men from the inquiry.
But would anybody come forward if they had a scratch and they were seen on that,
Possibly.
On that day?
On that day, we had an international football match at Wembley Stadium between England and Holland. We know that there were scuffles in the area. It may well have been he was involved in one of those scuffles and is just an innocent passerby.
What about the murder weapon?
It's described as possibly a good quality kitchen knife.
And that suggests that perhaps it was premeditated?
Yes, it's unlikely that anybody would find that in a carriage. That person had it with him when he left his home that day.
And finally, the one thing that's emerged is that there's probably a lot more people on that train who you haven't actually interviewed yet.
Yes, we've analysed the witnesses' statements. Now, we now believe that there are possibly up to 20 other persons we need to trace.
They must come forward, mustn't they?
Yes, we need the assistance of anyone who can help in this inquiry.
What about this motiveless murder? I mean, it was an awful story and it hit all the headlines. A lot of people have been upset by it.
Yes. A very savage attack, made more disturbing by the fact that it was in the middle of the day in such a public place. We need to catch that person.
And an incentive, possibly over £35,000 reward, 30,000 reward for that, if any information. Here's the number if you want to call, 01 811 8055. Or if you prefer, here's the direct line to the murder incident room, 01 434 5175. That's 01 434 5175.
And there's a missing person from Incident Desk, as you may have noticed. David's colleague, Helen Phelps, has left the police, but we didn't want to lose her from the programme. So now in civvies, Helen has joined the Crimewatch team full-time. Her first assignment involves an extraordinary piece of medical detective work. 2 months ago, on the morning of Saturday the 12th of March, the severed limbs of a woman were found in East London. The woman had been dead for between 24 and 48 hours, and so far her identity is a complete mystery. And that's where police need your help. Here's Helen's report.
London Docklands. Once dominated by wharves and warehouses, it's now been transformed. Private homes, office blocks and leisure amenities now make up the skyline. With these developments has come a dramatic drop in serious crime, but unfortunately, it's not been eliminated.
This is the East India Dock Road, the A13, a main road through the area and always very busy. Just off this road is this house. It's a women's refuge and it provides sanctuary for women in fear or in danger.
so we won't be given the building's exact location. Sometime between 6:30 p.m. on Friday the 11th of March and the early morning of Saturday the 12th of March, someone approached the front of the refuge, climbed the steps and went up to the dustbins. Whoever it was left some neatly wrapped black plastic packages by the bins. At 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, one of the residents of the refuge was putting some rubbish out. It was then she noticed the packages. The packages contained 2 arms and 2 legs. They belonged to someone who was white, as these police drawings illustrate. There was no further clue to the person's identity. The officer in charge is Detective Inspector Bill Cutts.
Well, obviously, we had very little to go on to begin with. We had the 4 limbs, and all we could say that they were the limbs from a woman, an adult woman, and she was white. So I had to get a team of men together, and then the real hard work, police work began. And what we're going to do is a lot of hard work. Dave's going to be the exhibits officer, Trevor's going to be the office manager, the rest of you are going to be investigators on it. Now, Peter there is going to check up on all missing persons, women, reported since the 1st of January this year throughout the UK in the 20 to 50 age group. And Dave and Reg, I want you to get in touch with the local social services and check out all women that come to notice through domestic problems going back to the 1st of January last year.
Governor, are there any marks on the limbs that were going to help us to identify this woman?
Yes, we got the nails for a start. They're bitten right back. Suggested a woman living on her nerves, very nervous. They're ever so short and obviously may have suffered prior to the incident. A lot of worry on her mind. On the big toe, red nail varnish, no trace of it on the fingernails. The wrist appears to be some scar in there. We're not sure what that is. We're going to have to rely on the forensic labs and the pathologists, and we haven't got much more than that.
Whilst the police were continuing to check the files of missing persons, already there was a picture emerging of the victim, and there were more clues to come. A crucial part of the investigation was a forensic examination of the limbs. This was conducted by Dr. Vanessis, a Home Office pathologist.
We felt initially that it was from a fairly young person, and subsequently we were of the firm opinion that she was a lady of a late 20s, early 30s age group. From the size of the limbs, she must have been a fairly well-built young woman, and we felt she was at least 10 stone, possibly up to 11 stone in weight. We have estimated her height, and we worked it out to be about 5 feet 7.5 inches, give or take an inch either way.
Were there any indications, Doctor, she wore jewellery?
The strongest indication was an indentation of the middle finger of her right hand, which indicated that there had been a ring there.
Did she have any distinguishing features?
The most interesting thing was a number of scars on the left wrist and forearm, which were typical of someone who had attempted suicide by cutting their wrists in the past.
What about the legs?
The interesting thing about the legs was that the left leg in particular was slightly longer than the right leg, although she would not have had a noticeable limp. There was a very tiny fracture of one of the long bones, which she may even not have noticed, but it's possible she could have fallen over on that leg and caused that fracture. She seemed to be a person who was very active, maybe perhaps did a lot of dancing in her time. Certainly, we had the impression that she wore high heels quite frequently from the way the toes were crowded. In addition, she had joining of 2 toes, which was on both feet, which is a congenital abnormality, which, although would not have given her a lot of trouble, would have been quite noticeable to someone who'd known her well.
At the Metropolitan Police Laboratory, the forensic examinations continued.
We found out her blood group was Group B, which is a fairly unusual group. In addition, we looked for various drugs to see whether she had been on either hospital medication or whether she in fact had taken an overdose, and we found that there were
trace amounts of benzodiazepines. One of the group of these drugs is Valium or Librium, that sort of drug. So she may have in fact been on tranquilizers.
These small but critical points have now been fed into the police computers. Initially, the police had very little to go on, but from scientific tests, they now know a lot more about this woman. She probably suffered from depression and may once have been suicidal. It's known she took the tranquilizer diazepam. This woman was used to suffering, and she may have confided in someone. The police don't know who she is, but someone watching probably does. So just to recap, here are the main points again. She was aged approximately 30 and about 5'7" tall. She weighed about 10 stone and was of medium build. She was of nervous disposition, with badly bitten fingernails and multiple scars on her left wrist.
And police have one further clue. At 9:30 on the night of March the 11th, that's the night before the limbs were found, a man was seen sitting in a car parked just off the East India Dock Road near the women's refuge. The car was a dark blue Cortina, and the man, smoking a cigarette and wearing glasses, was described as of Mediterranean appearance. If you think you may know the woman, or if you can identify that man, please call us now. You can talk to the detective in charge, or if you prefer, a BBC researcher. All calls will be treated in absolute confidence. The number to ring is 01811 8055 here, or you can call the incident room at Limehouse Police Station direct on 01488 5212. That's 01488 5212.
6 weeks ago, the body of a young woman was found by a farmer in County Antrim. She was Inga Hauser, an 18-year-old student who travelled to Britain from Munich using an Interrail pass. That's a ticket to travel on virtually any train in Europe. Judging from the diary that was found among her belongings, she thoroughly enjoyed herself. But somehow things went wrong. Can you help tell us how and where? Our reconstruction begins just after she'd arrived in London at Easter time.
There is a staff announcement for Mr. John Cram.
Saturday, 2nd of April. Dear Mum and Dad, you dears, you probably could not imagine how much I like England. I would preferably stay a year longer. I am totally entranced by London. And you don't need to worry about me, for the people here are so lovable and so ready to help that I'm quite sure I shall never be short of money. See you soon. Happy Easter. Your Inga Maria.
During her trip, Inga kept notes in her diaries, and she wrote several postcards to friends and relatives.
Oxford, this is Oxford. Train at platform 2 is the 1346 to Banbury, Leamington Spa, Coventry.
Monday, 4th of April. Went to Oxford. Stayed at the youth hostel. Ate too much. Decided to go to Bath.
Inga phoned home regularly. She also took snapshots of the places she visited.
Tuesday, 5th of April. Going to Liverpool now. Took a short walk through Liverpool Station region. Went on to Preston and from there to Inverness. Slept in the train. Dear Gabi, dear Christian, dear Martina. Morning has broken in Scotland. Breakfast in Inverness. Nice town. Have to see the Loch Ness Monster one day.
There are no more postcards after this, and this is her last photograph. But her diaries go on.
My journey has run without hitch so far, and it is really indescribably lovely. Unfortunately, my money is slowly running out.
Inga drew this sketch of someone on a train. Do you know who it is?
Going to Glasgow now. Snowy mountains. Wild landscape. Went from Glasgow to Ayr and from there to Stranraer to get over to Ireland. Saw the sea, beautiful and mysterious. Wonder where I stay tonight. Need more money.
That was the last entry in her diary. These two passengers were boarding the ferry when they almost bumped into Inga. They remember following her onto the boat. Later, one of them saw Inga cross the lounge. But she was without her rucksack. Where was it? Had she left it with someone else? A few minutes afterwards, Inga was seen on deck. Again, she didn't have her rucksack. This was the last positive sighting that police have of Inga. The ferry, the Galloway Princess, docked at Larne shortly after 9:30 that evening. But the witnesses say Inga was not among the foot passengers who caught the train to Belfast. Were you on that train? If so, did you see Inga? More than 100 vehicles were on the ferry that night. So did someone give Inga a lift? And if so, who? And where did they go? Inga could have travelled anywhere in Ireland. For 2 weeks she disappeared. But up the coast from Larne, near Ballycastle, a woman like Inga was seen. Several people have told police that a girl was hitchhiking in the Northampton area on Sunday, the 17th of April. If it wasn't Inga, do you know who it was? At the northeast tip of County Antrim is Ballypatrick Forest. And here, in a remote corner over a mile from the main road, a farmer was searching for his sheep. He'd spotted something in a small clearing and went back to have a look. Inga had been dead for several days. She had severe head injuries, but no motive has been established for her murder. On the Sunday, 3 days before Inga's body was found, two local people noticed a red car pull out behind them. It was travelling away from the point where Inga was later found. A man and a woman were in the car. The vehicle went down a no-through road. Who was in the car, and what were they doing in the forest? Above all, where had Inga been for the fortnight since she left the ferry on the 6th of April, till her body was discovered among the trees? Mr. Kasky, we're talking about events that happened after Easter and the 2 weeks immediately after that. It's a long time ago. Now, if anybody had seen Inga, why would they remember her?
She was a friendly and outgoing young girl and made friends easily. She liked England and the English people and took delight in telling people about this. If anyone met her in her travels throughout England and Scotland and she struck up conversation about this, we would be very pleased to hear from them, particularly if she imparted to them her plans when she was going to Ireland.
Now, the key does seem to be what happened at Larne, because that's where her letters home stop, that's when her phone calls stop, that's when the diary stops. A blank 2 weeks. So people on that boat presumably must hold the key to it.
Yes, I would make an appeal to the people on the boat. Anyone who made the crossing that night, who saw Inga, was she in anyone's company? Did they see her leave the boat, and again, was she in anyone's company? Or was she seen leaving Larne, and if so, by what means?
The motive. I know you don't know what it is, but you must have quite strong suspicions. What are they?
I believe the motive to be sexual, but I do believe that Inga did fight for her honour, and she died as a result of putting up a fight.
Well, there must be people watching who have some idea of where Inga was, what she was doing, or think they saw her, or who might have suspicions about who committed this crime. do please call if you can help in any way. 01 811 8055. That's 01 811 8055. It's in the strictest confidence, and if you don't want to speak to a police officer, you can ask to talk to a BBC researcher if you prefer. You can also phone the Murder Incident Room at Ballycastle. That's on 02657 63711. That's 02657, the code for Ballycastle, 63711.
Well, our next case is another murder investigation, I'm afraid. It's a vicious attack on a woman in Hertfordshire. It was her 81st birthday. Joan Macan was a well-known dog breeder, and she'd judged at many shows, including Crufts. What wasn't so well known about her was that she'd been something of a heroine for her remarkable undercover work during the Second World War. Using a false name, Marie Buquet, she worked in occupied France, and she was decorated for helping more than 80 Allied airmen to escape across enemy lines. Later, she settled in Hertfordshire, which is where our reconstruction begins. This is the National Trust's Ashridge estate, and beyond this monument at the bottom of the lane is Mrs. Macan's cottage, Timspring. Her nearest neighbours were her housekeeper, Rita Green, who lives with her son, Dennis.
It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of May. Britain is sticking to its policy of not making...
There you are. Come along, out of the way. Come on. Come on. There. Lookies. Have your breakfast. Morning, Dennis.
Morning, Mrs. Macan. Shall I take the dogs out now, then?
No, I think you better leave them a bit longer until I've gone. I'm just off to the hairdresser's. Ooh, you might feed the bigger dogs, though.
Okay.
Morning, Gemma.
Morning, Miss McCann.
That morning, Joan was at the hairdresser for her regular appointment.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
She'd been coming here every Thursday morning for 12 years.
Do you want to go through?
Right. But you really
By 2 o'clock, she was back home to meet her old friend, Margaret Williamson.
Yes, it's such a pity, really, to do any inbreeding.
It is, really.
Margaret was also a dog breeder, and she wanted to talk about using one of Joan's dogs for breeding. Joan was renowned for her Labradors, and people from all over the country came to visit her, so any number of people could have had a good look at her house.
Yes, oh dear.
By 7:15, Joan was getting ready to go to a meeting of the Kent, Sussex and Surrey Labrador Association.
Well, I'm off now, darlings. Be good.
She'd been made president 15 months ago.
Bye-bye.
Rita, her housekeeper, lives 100 yards up the road.
I'm off now, Rita. You won't forget to go down and turn on the lights for me and lock up, will you?
No, I'll go down later.
Goodbye.
The meeting was being held at the Bell Inn at Godstone in Surrey. It was a long way from Mrs. Macan's home, but she always made a special effort to attend the meetings in spite of the 60-mile drive.
Council meeting on the 24th of March last, I'm pleased to be able to report to you that all our nominations for inclusion in the judges' list have been accepted by the council. And
I'm terribly sorry to be so late. The traffic was awful on the M25. It took me about 3 hours to get here.
Yes.
Can I sit here?
At about the same time, Rita was making her way down to the house to lock up for the night. Rita knew that Mrs. Macan disliked coming back to a dark house, especially as it was so isolated, and she usually put the lights on to make the house look occupied before she locked up.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm now declared the meeting closed. It's 11 o'clock. Don't forget our next meeting here on June the 6th. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Mrs. Macan's friend Brian Hayward remembers she was a little anxious about the long journey home in the dark.
You're welcome.
Oh, would you follow? Could I follow you back onto the M25, please?
Yes, that's
You know how tied up I get in that one-way system.
Yes, that's good. No problem.
Well, I'll see you in a month, then.
Look forward to that, then, Joan.
Goodbye, Brian.
Bye-bye.
As she followed him out of the car park, Brian, of course, couldn't have known that he would be the last person to see her alive. A courting couple are crucial witnesses for what happened next. This is the lane leading to Mrs. Macan's cottage.
What do you want?
The couple noticed a car drive up and down 6 or 7 times. They didn't see what make of car it was, but they remember it was a 4-door saloon. Later, the same couple saw an estate car drive down the track. That must have been Mrs. Macan arriving home. Mrs. Macan died before she even got into the house. Well, Richard Pottinger is in charge of the investigation. Why do you think she was killed?
Very difficult to say. We know it's a very savage, senseless killing of a defenceless lady. The burglar had no reason to kill her whatsoever. He could have escaped from that house into the woods with no problems at all.
Well, there were several suspicious cars seen in the lane by that couple. Half an hour after the time she would have arrived home, the couple saw an estate car, rather like her own car, coming back down the lane. Could that have been her car?
No, it was not her car at all. We believe that it was a Bluebird estate car leaving about 1:30. We still not have eliminated that vehicle, so we asked if that was owned by a courting couple for them to come forward.
Right. And what about that saloon car then, the one that was seen going up and down several times?
The saloon car, all we know is it's a 4-door, dark-coloured saloon. We haven't traced those occupants, so we asked them to come forward as well.
And we don't know the make or the colour of that for sure?
Not at all.
No. The stolen property, it seems to me, is going to be the key to solving this murder.
That is correct.
And there were 3 very distinctive bronze statues among the goods stolen. We'll start with that one. This is a copy of one of the ones that's stolen. This is cast iron. The one that was stolen was bronze.
Yes, it's a bronze antique pointer dog with a rabbit, signed on the side with PJ Menet, valued about £2,500. This is a greyhound on the one stolen, solid brass, but on a small solid bronze on a smaller base, with E from A on the base signed there.
Right. The third one is so rare we can't get a copy of it, but we do have an artist's impression of what it looked like.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
That is extremely rare. It's of a pointer dog with a rabbit on the base. It has become detached from the base, the one that has been stolen.
Well, those are very distinctive. What else was stolen?
A number of items were stolen, including a number of small snuff boxes, which are quite unusual, and a number of small ornaments.
Right. So what is the most important part of your appeal tonight?
My most important appeal is to all antique dealers, second-hand dealers. Should any of this property be offered to them, please contact us. But in the main, I'm asking members of the public, no doubt those who are watching tonight, there must be somebody out there who knows who's responsible for this particular vicious murder, either mother, father, friends, or whatever. I urgently ask them to come forward and contact us.
All right, Mr. Potter, thank you very much indeed. And if you recognise or you think you know about either of those cars, or you know the whereabouts of those bronze dog statues, this is the number to phone. It's 01 811 8055, or you can phone the Murder Incident Room direct on 0707 335500. That's 0707, the code for Welwyn Garden City, 335500.
This is John Lee from the BBC programme See Here, who's going to help us with our first appeal this month. But that's because our first case is about the last days of a 20-year-old from South Wales, Susanne Greenhill, who was profoundly deaf. In other words, so deaf that she heard no sounds at all and couldn't speak. Now that's why we're making special efforts to communicate with deaf people throughout this sequence. They may be especially well placed to help with this inquiry. So, as well as the normal Crimewatch subtitles on CFAX, we'll have signing and extra captions too. Susanne was engaged to be married. Her fiancé, Tony Wesson, was also deaf, and she saw him almost every night. But she was fiercely independent and lived on her own in a rented flat. Our reconstruction begins on Friday evening, the 1st of July, in Newport, in Gwent. Tony Wesson was surprised to find Susanne's curtains had been drawn. It was only 6 p.m.
What's the matter? Yeah, I'm going. Susanne. Help!
Susanne had been raped and stabbed repeatedly in her neck and back. Forensic scientists and detectives experienced at scenes of crime described this as one of the most upsetting they'd ever had to deal with. Susanne had lived here for 2 years and took great pride in the flat's appearance. Her life was sometimes lonely. She was isolated by her disability and shunned by some who found her deafness made them feel uncomfortable. She'd been born deaf and from an early age attended special schools. She remained close to her family and visited her parents and grandparents regularly. Susanne went every Tuesday to the Deaf Club at Lady Hill Centre, but she seemed happiest with her fiancé. Several times a week, they went to the Newport Leisure Centre. Swimming was one of Susanne's favourite pastimes. And Tony had persuaded her to join him weight training. She also joined him in another hobby. He's keen on model making, especially motorbikes.
Hey. Good.
Friends remarked on how happy Susanne seemed when she and Tony were together. Susanne was very fashion conscious, and a week before her death, she experimented with a different hair colour. She turned from blonde to henna chestnut.
As far as the forensic evidence is concerned, across Susanne's eyes was tape, and we know that this tape is the Fast 8 zinc oxide 5 centimetre in width.
A roll of that tape was sold at Wilcox Chemist in Malpas Road that week to a man with a plaster cast on his right arm. Detectives need to find that man to eliminate him from their inquiries. Another roll was sold at Watkins Davis Chemist at Bettis Centre to a man who wanted just a short length cut from a roll.
And you haven't got anything less on the tape here? Oh, well. I'll have it then.
Right.
Yep, I'll do.
The other piece of vital information we've had from the flat is a footmark. And this mark was definitely made by a person who was there at the time that Susanne was killed. The mark is of a foot, approximately 4.5 to 5 in size, and this would give us an average height size of 5'1", certainly no more than 5'3". It is possibly, and say possibly, an adolescent. And this footmark was found in the flat in blood.
Police have tried to piece together two elements of Susanne's life: who she knew and where she'd been the day she died. Some of her acquaintances have not yet been traced, and there's one man in particular detectives need to hear from. He was seen with her several times, at Sainsbury's, where he accompanied her shopping, at Newport bus station, where he went with her towards her home, and at Maysglass Industrial Estate.
Could I have a hot dog, please? With onions, sir? Do you want onions? Yes, please.
If this is you, or you know who this is, please call us now. This is all that's known of Susanne's last day. Between 9 and 10 o'clock, she met a friend and helped her with her shopping. She was also seen at Littlewoods in Newport Shopping Precinct. She came here often for morning tea and toast. At roughly 10 to 5, she was seen taking shopping home from Sainsbury's. And at 5:30, she was seen in Goodrich Lane.
Hello, darling.
Not knowing she was deaf, they thought her rather snooty. But then they saw her go to a garage, perhaps looking for her fiancé, and finding it locked, they saw her lose her temper. What happened after that is still a mystery. Well, Glenn, we've seen from the reconstruction clearly most of what you need to hear. Is there anything else?
Yes, Nick, there is. In fact, we have a new sighting of Susanne. This is a sighting on the 27th of June. That's 2 days prior to her death. On that day, she was seen coming from the entrance to Shaftesbury Park, where a fair was being erected.
That's what, a couple hundred yards from her home?
It is indeed. This would have been about 8:30, 8:45. She was wearing very distinctive clothing. In fact, it's what's described as a hot pants suit, which was either pink or pinky orange. I would have thought that with clothing like that, somebody in the fair would have seen her. And we're asking anybody at the fair who saw her, and in particular anybody who saw her talking to any male person at the fair, to contact us.
As it happens, there's another link with that fun fair. In fact, two separate sightings that could point to the same man who might be the killer or might need to be eliminated. At around midnight, in fact, on Wednesday the 29th of June, the day that Susanne died, this travelling fair was still setting up, due to open, in fact, the next day. And workers were surprised to see a car drive into the park at speed and later drive away down Evans Street. A couple of hours later, another witness remembers seeing a man in a blue checked shirt walking along the junction of Evans Street and Shaftesbury Street. He got into a dark-coloured Mark III Ford Escort and did a fast three-point turn. And the witness remembers that the car had a tow bar and the registration number began, they think, A59. Obviously, you've got to eliminate whoever was driving that car, whoever was walking there. Anyone else you need to eliminate?
Yes, that is correct. We're very anxious to trace the driver of that car. We're also anxious to trace a man who came into our inquiry very early on. This man went into a fish and chip shop in Cross Keys. He had blood on both his arms. He appeared to be intoxicated but didn't smell of drink. This man, we are very anxious to trace.
We've got a video fit of him. Describe him for us, will you?
Yes, he was 6 foot in height. He had mousy brown curly hair. He's described as very, very slim and age between 20 and 25 years.
You've had a lot of help, I know, from the local community and from the deaf community generally.
We have. The deaf community and the neighbours of Susanne have been particularly patient with us and very helpful. But we are sure, absolutely positive in fact, that there is more vital evidence out there. and we would appeal to anybody who has any evidence, however small it may appear to them. It could be vital in our inquiry to bring Susanne's brutal killer to justice.
If you knew Susanne any time in the last couple of years, do call us 811 8055. And we've a separate number for the deaf or hard of hearing. That's 01811 1066. And it's equipped with Minicom phones, which allow callers to type and read their messages. Now, that's only for the deaf who have Minicom or Vistel phones. The number 01811 1066. Or you can call the Main D police station direct. That's using ordinary phones on 0633 244 999. That's 0633, the code for Newport, 244 999.
Just over 5 months ago, during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, a religious teacher, Abdur Rashid, was murdered in London's East End. The killing shocked the Bangladeshi community where he lived, and police and local people are hoping Crimewatch viewers may be able to help find whoever killed him. Witnesses and friends in Whitechapel have helped us reconstruct what is known about the last day of his life. But our film begins 12 miles away from where he lived, in Essex. It's lunchtime on Wednesday the 27th of April. A group of children were following a nature trail on the edge of Epping Forest.
What's that?
It was the body of 46-year-old Abdur Rashid. It had been wrapped in a bedspread, tied with a sash cord and set alight. For the Muslims, the burning of the body is the ultimate disgrace. Abdur lived in the Whitechapel district of London's East End. It contains a tightly knit Bangladeshi community which is centred around the East London Mosque. Some parts of Whitechapel are being redeveloped, and sash cord used to tie the body may have been taken from a local building site. Abdur had been killed by a sharp instrument. Evidence suggests that a traditional kitchen knife, such as this dar, might have been the murder weapon. Abdur was well known in the area as a religious teacher. He came to this country in 1979 and worked part-time in the mosque. But in 1983, he left. After that, Abdur tried to make a living by teaching the Quran in people's homes. Police know that he had several arguments over debts. He was also selling saris and trinkets to women throughout the Tower Hamlets area, sometimes when their husbands weren't at home. Police say this may have caused some resentment. He was sending money regularly back to his family in Bangladesh. On at least one occasion, a contact of his in Birmingham took it for him. Maybe somebody there knows something about his death. Ramadan is the holiest month. It began in mid-April this year. It's the evening of Tuesday the 26th of April. At about 9 p.m, Abdur asked the family he lived with if he could make a phone call.
Telephone engage.
The family remembers Abdur looking through a blue book, possibly for a number. That book has not been found. When he finally got through, the end of his conversation was overheard. Abdur left the house at about 9:30. At 10 o'clock, he usually attended the mosque for prayers. But strangely, no one seems to have seen him there that night. At about 11, Abdur visited a friend in Romford Street. He seemed nervous. Soon afterwards, he left. At about 11:30, another witness, Abdul Noor, saw him going down a staircase in a different block in Romford Street, block number 25. At about the same time, round the corner in Fordham Street, he was seen outside the Sillet Cash and Carry.
না কিছু না আমি এক জুনো অপেক্ষা করতেছি
Who was he waiting for that night, and why? Some time later, Abdur Rashid was murdered. His killers may have bought some petrol in a can, but where? His body was driven north up the A11. They probably took the Epping New Road towards the M25. In the early hours of the morning, someone may have noticed a car approaching the Robin Hood roundabout. It would have turned left towards High Beach, which is a popular area for courting couples. It would have pulled in a few hundred yards along Fairmead Road. Abdur's body was dumped just inside the wood. The flames must have been visible to any passing car. Well, Detective Superintendent Jeff Parrott is leading the inquiry into Abdur's death. Can you tell me a little bit more about what sort of man Abdur was?
Yes, upon his arrival in the country, Abdur took employment at the East London Mosque. And whilst that employment was terminated in 1983, he was still known in the community as the Holy Man. As such, he was very, very respected, and throughout this inquiry, everyone has referred to him as a good man. And with that in mind, it's a complete mystery as why anyone should wish to kill him.
What you really need most to know now is where Abdur went and what happened to him after that last sighting outside the Cash and Carry.
Yes, he obviously met someone outside the Cash and Carry, and from that point onwards, until his body was subsequently discovered, we have no sightings whatsoever.
What about the car park at High Beach, near where his body was found?
Yes, that is used every evening by courting couples, in particular, often into the early hours of the morning. It may well be, and it's distinctly possible, that couples were still parked there at the time Abdur's body was dumped and set fire to. It may well give rise to some embarrassment to people there, but I would urge them to come forward and give us what information they have. And I can only seek to emphasise that we will treat their information in the strictest confidence.
Right, you guarantee that. And you're quite sure that if somebody was there, they could well have seen something?
I'm sure they would. This burst of flame would be so obvious.
Now, you haven't yet found the blue book that he looked that telephone number up in that night. Where do you think that might be?
We haven't found that book. There's little doubt that that book contains the telephone number of the killer of Abdur Rashid.
So that's a vital clue.
It is a vital clue indeed, yes.
And the other clue is that the body was wrapped up in a bedspread, and we've had an artist draw up a detail from that. Where do you think that might come from?
We haven't traced the origin of that bedspread. It's cream with a green pattern, and little doubt about that once we trace the origin of that bedspread, it will take us directly back to the killers of Abdur Rashid again.
So please do ring us if you recognise that bedspread. Now, thank you very much, Mr. Parrott, for the moment. Abdur Rashid's friends and associates are anxious, of course, to do everything they can to find his killers, and Abdur's 14-year-old son, Haruna Rashid, and one of the elders from the East London Mosque would like to make their own appeal in Bangladeshi.
আপনারা সবে জানেন যে মৌলানা আব্দুর রশিদ সাহেবরে মারা হইছে রোজাত এখন পর্যন্ত পুলিশে কোনো কিছু বাইর করতে পারে নাই
আমার বাবার হত্যা সম্পর্কে কেউ কোনো যদি তথ্য পাইয়া থাকেন তাহলে আপনারা দয়া প্রকাশে পুলিশকে অবগত করুন
এটা আমরা কমিটি থেকে সবে অনুরোধ করা যায় যে আপনারা আগুয়াইয়া এই পুলিশরা হৌকা এতে কোনো ডরাইবার বা ভয়ের কোনো কারণ নাই
Well, if you can help, please ring us. Here in the studio, waiting to take your call, as well as the detective here, we have a Bangladeshi speaker and a local community officer. The number, as always, to ring is 01811 8055. Or you can ring Edmonton Police Station direct on 01803 3311. That's 01803 3311.
Let's take you back now to the start of the August bank holiday, the Friday night. Were you in Hessel, near Hull, on Humberside that evening? Or have you ever taken driving lessons in that part of the world? If so, was your instructor called Keith Slater? On the night of Friday the 26th of August, Keith answered a knock on the door of his home and someone stabbed him to death. Police hope this reconstruction will prompt people who've ever known Keith Slater to come forward and help with the inquiry. Just outside Hessel, there's a wooded area called Little Switzerland. On Friday morning, Keith and his family walked down there for a picnic.
Here we go. See, both go in the end. Very good, isn't it?
Keith had no driving lessons that morning because his car was in for service. But by lunchtime, he'd picked up his car and called into the driving school. He was self-employed and had been franchised to the school for the past 16 months. Keith was a keen rugby player who almost always wore his Hessel Rugby Club tie and sweater while at work.
Get yourself comfy. Get your in. Make sure your mirrors are good. That's lovely. Now, we just follow the road round. That's it, now careful. That's it. That's fine, he's got right away, he's coming first. That's smashing.
That evening at 8:30, Keith's wife Carol finished work. She'd just started a part-time job as a cashier. There was a sale on at home base and she'd had a difficult and busy evening.
I had to remember all those codes. I had to print on codes every time I came up with the stuff. Oh.
Just before 9, after a little bit of shopping, they arrived at their home on Bonaccord Road. The children were staying the night with their grandmother, so the two of them came back to an empty house.
But 18 months ago, Ted dropped his drawbridge for the last time and moved here to this...
After dinner, Keith and Carol spent a quiet evening watching television. But shortly after 10:30, Carol, who wasn't interested in the programme, went to bed.
I'm going up now, love.
An hour later, at 11:30, Keith went up too. At midnight, in Northgate, this pub barman was walking home.
Can you tell me the way to Bonaccord Road?
I don't know, sorry.
A few minutes later, at Andy Carr's Taxis, close to Hessel Square.
Alpha 18, 210 Buffet Road to the Silver Cod.
Can you give me directions to Bonaccord Road?
Yes, if you go to the top, turn left, follow the road down, and it's first on your right-hand side.
Is it past the Nolan pub?
No.
The witnesses described this man as stocky, with crew-cut hair, and in his 20s or early 30s. If it was you, please call us straight away to be eliminated from this inquiry.
Keith, is it the police?
The police?
Keith Slater.
Here.
Keith!
The screams were heard by a couple walking home a block away. They thought it was a party. The couple then saw a young man in a dark coat come out of Bonaccord Road. At 12:25, a man was sighted heading towards the footbridge which spans the railway line and Clive Sullivan Way. It's now 6 weeks since the murder, and police are still anxious to trace everyone who knew Keith Slater and those who learned to drive with him. In particular, they'd like to hear from one young woman. A blonde girl was seen with him several times between February and July at the National Pub on National Avenue in Hull. She was petite, described as stunning, and witnesses remember that she wore a good deal of gold jewellery. Was this you? Or do you know who she was? She and Keith were also seen here in Cottingham. She was aged around 20, was smartly dressed, and may well have carried a briefcase. There's another woman detectives need to trace. On the day before the murder, a rugby friend of Keith's flashed his lights at Keith's car on First Lane, Anlaby. It was about 8:45 in the morning. Although Keith's diaries show no lessons booked for that time, a woman with fair or brownish hair was driving the car. Do you know who she was? Mr. Lilly, were those two different women or one and the same?
Well, the evidence is that the descriptions do differ somewhat, but really it is something we must keep an open mind on.
Now, there must be suspicions that Keith was having an affair with somebody whose boyfriend or husband didn't like it, or at least he suspected they were having an affair and took it out.
Yes, this is obviously an area that we've looked at. Inquiries have brought forth many useful lines, and that is one of them, yes.
Now, obviously, this woman or these women have done nothing wrong themselves. Obviously, if they don't come forward after an appeal, there'll be people who are bound to suspect that they're some sort of accessories to the murder. But you desperately need these women to come forward.
It really is imperative that these two women come forward. It is true to say that they have not committed any offence at this stage, but they really must come forward. I would urge also, of course, that if any relative or friend knows who these people are, then please come forward as soon as possible. It really is imperative that we trace these two people.
OK, now the man himself, who seems to have known something about the area, we've got quite a good description of him, haven't we?
Yes, we have an artist impression which was done by Carol Slater. Carol saw the assailant fighting with her husband as she came down the stairs, having heard the disturbance. And she made an artist impression as a result of that. What I would say, of course, is that that is exactly as Carol remembers him. I wouldn't feel for 1 minute that he has such starry eyes if he's sat at home now or indeed in a pub. But we must say that is as Carol remembers him in the heat of the moment.
Now, someone must have suspicions about a boyfriend, a husband, somebody they know who looks a bit like that. But one thing is that he must have got covered in blood that night.
Yes, Carol was covered in blood because Keith was bleeding quite profusely, and she was covered in blood as she helped him back in. The assailant must have been well covered in blood. What I would say is that there must be someone sitting at home who knows that someone came home during the early hours of Saturday the 27th of August, covered in blood, acting suspiciously. They must hold a question mark against such a person, and I would urge them, please contact us here or at the police station as soon as possible.
If you think you know who that man is, if you think you can help, if you think you know who those women are, if you knew Keith Slater and haven't yet contacted the police, and above all, if you know that woman or those women that were seen with him, please call us right away. 01811 8055, or call the incident room at Hull. That's on 501 222. That's 0482, the code for Hull, 501 222.
Our next case is the murder of Michael Williams 10 weeks ago. He was last seen alive on the Friday evening before the August bank holiday weekend. His body was found early next morning in Highgate Wood in North London, close to where he lived. But police need to know where he went and what happened to him during the course of that night. Michael was 43. He'd lived in Highgate all his life, and he was an active member of the local church. He'd been married for 18 years and had a 2-year-old daughter. Michael was always keen to spend as much time as he could with her and worked flexi hours and often came home early to look after her. Our reconstruction begins in Pimlico in South London, where Michael worked. He was employed by the Home Office here at Horseferry House, where he'd helped set up the police national computer. Ironically, the very system which is now being used to help track down whoever killed him. It's Friday the 26th of August.
Hello. Hello, it's me. I just wondered how late you'd be tonight.
Look, I'll work for another hour or so. Should be home about 8.
OK, I'll put Marie to bed then. We'll see you later.
Michael had been under a lot of pressure at work, and for the past week he'd been staying late every evening to finish a particular project.
We're off the Paviers for a few drinks. Coming?
Oh, lucky for some. No, I've still got work to do.
Oh, come on. You've got 3 whole days off.
Why not?
I'll wait outside.
See you in a while.
So instead of going straight home that night, he came here to the Paviour's Arms in Pimlico.
Let's do a bit of music, do a bit in the garden.
Yeah.
Would you like another drink? No, thank you.
No,
You sure?
not for me either, thanks.
Oh, God, is that the time? No, I said I'd be home at 8-ish.
Yeah, it's about time it's going. So you're going on the tube?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll come with
You coming? Bye, all. See you next week. Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Yes, I did, but it's late. No problem.
Right, well, this is where I change. So, see you, Michael. Have a nice weekend.
That was the last time anyone he knew saw him alive. From now, we can only speculate about where Michael went next. If he'd taken his usual journey home, he'd have continued on the Victoria line as far as Warren Street or Euston, where he would have changed onto the Northern line. By then, it would have been about midnight. From here, he'd get on the Northern line to Highgate. But it's by no means certain that he did take his usual route home that night. Perhaps he met someone along the way. Police need to talk to anyone who may have seen him. If he did come to Highgate Station, his walk home would have taken him past Highgate Wood. Or he may have gone one step further along the Northern line to East Finchley, because someone who looked like Michael was seen there at about 12:30 by a ticket collector.
Really? Which way to the Lewis?
Toilets are closed here, Gov.
Okay.
If that was Michael, where did he go next? Was he planning to walk home from here? This is Highgate Wood, a popular spot even early in the mornings.
Come on then, let's go home.
It's the next day, Saturday morning. At about 8:20, a woman walking her dog saw something lying by the path leading to the wood. It was Michael Williams' body. He'd been killed by a single blow to the throat.
Yankee Romeo from 559. Can you call the CID? I found a dead body in the alleyway off of Lanchester Road, N6.
Police need to know whether he was killed there or whether his body was left there later. Several people who'd used the path even earlier that morning didn't see the body, so it's vital that more witnesses come forward to help work out what did happen. At 6 o'clock that morning, this man was walking his dog near the woods past the spot where Michael's body was found. He saw nothing there, but then just round the corner, something odd happened.
My dog's usually quiet, and she saw this man standing over there, ran at him and barked at him hysterically. The man was standing there, absolutely immobile, and looked as if he was hypnotized under the influence of something. He was not moving at all. It was absolutely unreal how the man stood there and did not react to my dog, who was attacking him and barking at him.
Three-quarters of an hour later, as the gates to the wood were being unlocked for the day, the strange man had gone. And just 5 minutes after that, there was still nothing seen by the path. So police believe it must have been between 7 o'clock and 7:40 that his body was put there. It may have been dumped from a car. And there's a postscript. This is the New Argent Tandoori restaurant in Fry and Barnet Road in Southgate. The day after Michael's body was found, someone came into the restaurant and paid by credit card.
Your bill, sir.
Well, that card, of course, belonged to Michael Williams. Peter Wilton, Michael had been robbed of all the property he had on him. Was robbery the motive, do you think?
That certainly was one motive, but this case has homosexual connotations. He was a bisexual. It may well be that he met somebody and left somebody before he got attacked. I would like that person to come forward, or any person that was attacked in the locality that hasn't reported it before. Will they please come forward?
What description do you have of that strange man seen standing at 6 o'clock in the morning in Highgate Wood in some kind of trance?
Yes, he's never been identified. He's 6 foot tall, white man, slim build, blondish brown hair, with a beard of the same colouring.
Complete mystery, that. Whoever murdered Michael, was he a karate expert?
Could well be. We've spoken to several karate experts, and they say it would take several years of experience to deliver a blow such as that, because there was a lot of force used to Michael Williams' throat.
So a clue might lie there.
Yes.
Now you need to trace whoever used Michael's access card at the new Argent Tandoori restaurant, if only to eliminate him from your inquiries.
Yes, I would like them to come forward, because they may well not have been the person that attacked Michael Williams. They may have got the card by buying it, finding it, so I would like them to come forward. It may well be that other people were there whilst they used it as well, so they might know something about it.
That will obviously save you hundreds of man-hours of work.
Certainly.
Do you promise him discretion if you come forward?
Yes, most certainly. Yes, we're confidential.
Right. Now, the main hope must be to trace some of Michael's property, all in a black and white carrier bag with ID on it.
That's right.
If we just run through the property very quickly, there was a radio pager called a Voda page.
Yes.
That may have been discarded somewhere, so that could be an important clue if anybody finds that. There was a computer manual.
Yes, his own.
There was his Home Office pass.
That's right.
And also a signet ring with his initials on. We don't have that, of course. And a distinctive Rolex watch. Could you tell me about that?
Yes, it was made for him about 17 years ago, and the peculiar thing about it is that there were clasps around the face of the watch, holding the face of the watch, so it is quite distinctive.
Right, so we're looking for all those items of property. If you were in Highgate Woods early that Saturday morning, please call us, even if you don't actually think you saw anything of interest. And if there's anything you can add to what police know of where Michael was that Friday night, Saturday morning, again, please call. The number here in the studio, as always, is 01811 8055, or ring the incident room direct, and that is 01803 3311. It's 01803 3311. If you live in Kent, and if you've brought any double glazing this year, you might be able to help solve our first case tonight. Since last Christmas, David Short had worked for Danem Windows as their East Kent representative. 10 weeks ago, on the evening of Thursday, the 22nd of September, he was murdered. Despite quite precise information about his movements that night, police have so far drawn only blanks in the search for his killer. Our reconstruction begins in the seaside town of Broadstairs, where David lived. Broadstairs is a popular holiday resort between Ramsgate and Margate on the southeast coast. Perched high above the town is Bleak House, which a century ago inspired Charles Dickens' novel. David Short was 36. He'd lived in Broadstairs for most of his life and had done a variety of jobs. Every day he exercised his dogs around the Ethel Road area, where for the past 9 months he'd lived with his common-law wife, Michelle. 2 years ago, David was working in a well-known local hotel as a barman. One night, a barmaid recalls there was a visit by 2 men.
Oi, mate, any more trouble from you, and I'll bleed and kill you. Have you got that?
What was that all about?
Nothing.
A week later, David reported to work with a swollen face and black eyes. David used to frequent various night spots in Margate and Ramsgate, and police are anxious to talk to anyone who may have seen him in these clubs. They'd also like to speak to somebody called Mags, who David met apparently while working as a barman. In January of this year, David left bartending and started selling double glazing, a job he'd done in the past.
Good afternoon. I called the other day, Danem Windows.
Oh, Mr. Short. Yes, we're expecting. Would you like to come in?
Thanks very much. How are the kids?
Very fine, thank you. Would you go through?
Thank you. Well, why don't I show you a couple of our brochures? This includes our latest top-of-the-range bestseller, which features an aluminium frame with a hardwood surround.
Over the years, David had worked for several companies. Perhaps he sold double glazing to you.
I'll just look at the frame, because that's coming out. Oh, no problem there. and measure up. Get you a quote in no time.
Business was going very well for David, and he bought a distinctive white Rover car. But if you saw the car recently, you almost certainly noticed the damage to the paintwork. About a month before his death, someone had vandalised his car with paint stripper while it was parked outside his home. Someone obviously had a grudge against him and knew exactly where he lived. Two weeks before David was murdered, a neighbour noticed a short, dark-haired man with a moustache arguing with David on his doorstep. She thought perhaps it had something to do with his business. On Thursday, the 22nd of September, the day David died, he returned home from an afternoon appointment to cook the evening meal. It was about 5:30 when he sat down to eat with Michelle and his mother, who'd come over for dinner. They had a discussion about the new house David and Michelle were hoping to buy together.
How do you think you're going to like living in Dickens Road then?
Until
we've
right.
signed on that dotted line, I'm not taking anything for granted.
Don't worry. I went to the estate agents today. They've taken the sign down.
Yeah, they have. Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's something.
Yeah.
We'll be in by Christmas.
I'm sure we will be
I
in by
hope
Christmas.
so.
Across the road, a neighbour saw Michelle and David's mother leaving the house on their way to play bingo in Ramsgate. That was about 7 o'clock. 10 minutes later, she saw David leaving, smartly dressed and carrying a briefcase. His diary shows an appointment in Deal, and the witness remembers he sat in the car for a few minutes before driving off.
4 and 3, 43. 1 and 2, number 12. All the sixes, 66.
It was 9:15 when David returned home. There was a yellow Vauxhall Chevette parked across the road. It had broken down and the owner had gone off for help. At 9:15, just around the corner from David's home, a witness on St. Peter's Park Road saw a motorcyclist preparing to ride off. Police would like him to come forward. At about 9:20, the owner of the broken-down Chevette came back with his brother. They've told police that in the 20 minutes or so it took them to tow the car away, they don't remember seeing the white Rover. So had David gone out again? And if so, where? At about the same time, 1/4 mile away, another witness saw two men shouting in a car. The woman and child walking nearby may remember seeing the orange or red-coloured old-type saloon car. It stopped just around the corner, outside the Albion public house. At 9:45, David's mother and Michelle left the bingo hall in Ramsgate. In the 15 minutes it took them to get home, David was murdered. His body was lying on the pathway by 2 broken milk bottles. At about the same time, a man was seen running down this nearby alleyway. When the police and ambulance arrived, it was discovered that David had been sprayed in the face with CS gas and hit on the head twice with a heavy object.
Delta Alpha 30, Delta Alpha 30.
Well, in charge of this case is Detective Chief Inspector David Birchall. Mr. Birchall, what sort of man was David Short?
Well, to be frank, he wasn't very popular. He was a person who had had many threats made to him. 2 people, some 2 years prior to him being murdered, threatened him in the Castle Keep Hotel, where he worked, and shortly after that he was beaten up. A month before he died, someone poured paint stripper over his car, causing considerable damage, and we still don't know who did that. And the person who called on him 10 days beforehand, who was on his doorstep, who we still haven't traced, was arguing with him. We are interested in the 2 people at the Castle Keep and that man.
So it sounds as though there could be many possible motives for his death.
There are. We've investigated many things, but we're still not clear about what the actual motive is.
His social life seems to have been reasonably colourful.
Yes, indeed it was. He was a person who enjoyed himself and went around the nightclubs in Margate and Ramsgate.
And you wanted to find this person called Mags. Any clues on that?
We know that he was friendly with a person called Mags. We've put appeals out locally, but we've had no response. Anyone by the name of Mags who was associated with David Short, we'd like to hear from.
Now, as I said in the film, CS gas was sprayed in David's face. Where could that have come from? Because it's illegal to sell it in this country.
It is indeed. There are 2 canisters here. They are obtainable in France, and we'd like to hear from anyone who knows of anyone who had possession of CS gas in that type of canister, particularly people from Kent. We'd also like to hear from a man, an anonymous caller, who called the incident room shortly after the murder. He told us that CS gas had been obtained in Dover to do a job in Margate. That man promised to come back to us. He hasn't, and we'd like to hear from him.
Right, please do call us. And finally, could you recap then on the several people who were seen near David's house on the night that he died?
Yes, as the appeal shows, we're looking particularly for 3 lots of people. There was a man on a motorcycle at 9:15 seen near to his house. We know that there were 2 men in a car who were arguing about a quarter of a mile away from his house, and a man was seen running away from the scene of the crime round about the time the ambulance arrived. He was in St Peter's Park Road, Broadstairs.
So these people need to come forward, if only to be eliminated from your inquiries.
Yes, and we can assure we'll treat them with discretion if in fact they do come forward.
Right, they can save police a lot of time, wasted time, if you can come forward and be eliminated from the inquiries, and maybe you saw something significant. Just to remind you, it was Thursday, September the 22nd. If you can help Mr Birchall and any of his team with any information at all, do please ring us. The number here to the studio is 01811 8055, or you can ring the incident room direct, and that number is 0843 225566. That's 0843, the code for Margate, 225566.
Well, now we go to Liverpool. Detectives have asked us to help them find a killer who appears to be deranged. In fact, some newspapers have likened it to a Jack the Ripper crime. The facts are that someone, or conceivably several people, killed a prostitute and then mutilated her body. The victim, Linda Donaldson, was found 18 miles away at Winnick Lane near Lee. Helen Phelps takes up the story.
About a mile from Liverpool city centre is Canning Street. It's a small part of the Toxteth area, and it's the city's main red light district. Every night, about 20 women are out looking for clients who circulate the area in cars. Many of the women here are on the streets for one reason: heroin. They're drug addicts and have turned to prostitution as a means of funding their needs. Linda Donaldson was one of them. She was well liked. A number of the other women and one of her regular clients have spoken to us about her.
Her mother was only 15 when she had Linda. Her father was from another country, and Linda never saw him. Linda was brought up by her grandmother.
What was she like?
Very friendly, a great personality. I found her quite a lovable person, and loving in return. I was her client at first, obviously, but I really do miss her.
I liked her. Everyone liked her. All the girls got on with her.
If there ever was a punter that was really bad or evil, you know, or he wanted something that kinky, she'd tell you, she'd let you know about him.
She just cared. She cared. She was that sort of person.
Linda was careful in a number of ways. She regularly visited this clinic, which was set up to prevent the spread of AIDS by distributing free needles and condoms. And she took clients home by a back alley, back Canning Street, so as not to offend neighbours.
I want somebody who walks the streets to respond.
Linda was invited to appear on the Kilroy programme a year ago and talked about this very issue.
Police in Liverpool wanted us to walk on a deserted street in front of the cathedral, and then they thought about it and others a bit more, and they put us back into the residential area.
Do you get problems
Well,
with residents in Liverpool?
I certainly don't walk past when someone's got kids around me. I wouldn't dream of chatting up a man right in front of kids. Not many girls will.
From 7 o'clock on the night of Monday the 17th of October, Linda was at her regular spot here on the corner of Canning Street, where she lived, and Catherine Street. She was distinctive because she always wore black. Sometime before 10 o'clock, she visited this shop in Windsor Street to buy some groceries. It was part of a normal routine. After shopping, she returned to her flat to feed her pets. She walked everywhere quickly.
Come on, love.
Linda loved animals. She had a dog and 3 cats, strays which she and her flatmate had rescued from the streets.
Where's me kiss then, eh? Hey? Yeah.
In Belgium, the trial of the British fans involved in the Hauser disaster opens in confusion. Tonight, many of them are on their way back home to Liverpool.
By 11 o'clock, Linda was back at her usual corner. She was spotted by 2 policemen.
You are?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It was a quiet night, but other women say Linda met a number of clients.
What's your name, love?
It's Tracy.
Tracy was her working name. It's vital that anyone who saw or met her that night comes forward. About 11:30, another prostitute was approached by a man whose behaviour made her uneasy.
You doing business?
Yeah?
Do you know anywhere dark?
Forget it.
No, come on.
Oh, come on, leave off, okay?
Oh, come on.
Look, I'm telling you, bug off or I'll get the police.
She was worried by the clanking in the bag, and so far police have been unable to trace him. She's compiled this video fit of him. He's described as 5 foot 11 inches tall, in his late 20s, and was wearing a white polo neck sweater. About 2 hours later, the same prostitute met Linda.
Hiya, Linda, how's it going?
It's a bit quiet.
Yeah, it is. I've just had one of those weirdos tonight.
You're joking.
Told him to get on his bike. I'm going to call it a day now, okay?
Right.
See you around.
Yeah,
Take care. Bye.
Taxi.
As she got in, she noticed Linda moving towards a dark car which was pulling into Back Canning Street. Who was in the car? No one else saw her alive after this. Just over 4 hours later, 18 miles away, a maroon Ford Granada Mark II was spotted parked in Winnick Lane near Lee. People in the car may have seen something, and police urgently need to speak to them. Then at lunchtime, this elderly couple pulled off the M6 at junction 22. Winnick Lane links the motorway with the A580 East Lancashire Road. They pulled in at the same place where the maroon car had been seen earlier.
We were coming from home and we were travelling up to our daughter's in the Pennines. And usually about here I get stiff. I want to usually get out and stretch my legs.
And I said to Dorothy, is that a body down there? With that, I went down to look to make certain. Came back to Dorothy and said, it is a body, kid.
The body was naked. Linda had been stabbed to death and mutilated. Mr. Leaf stayed there while his wife went to fetch the police. Detective Chief Superintendent Ken Clark is in charge of the case.
We haven't been able to find a motive for the killing. It appears she was simply picked up, murdered, the body mutilated, and then dumped in this field where you see the men searching.
So where was she killed?
This, again, is a puzzle we haven't been able to satisfy ourselves about. It's quite obviously that the murder had plenty of room in order to carry out the killing and the mutilation. So there's somewhere between Liverpool and Winnick Lane that he has carried out the murder in plenty of light and taken his time over it. Despite appeals to the public, there's been no sign of a clothing or a handbag anywhere. And this is something that we want to find out. If anybody saw anybody acting suspiciously, such as dumping clothing or burning clothing, would the police come forward? And I appeal to anyone of the public who may have anything whatsoever, no matter how small or insignificant, it may be the vital clue that we require.
If you have any information, then call us now on 01 811 8055. Or you can ring the incident room direct on Liverpool 708 7277. That's 051, the code for Liverpool, 708 7277.